Hello, I'm a student of Bhikkhu Candana. This is just a reminder that he is a homeless monk, depending entirely on donations to live and share the Dhamma. If you want to help support Bhante, our teacher, please consider donating to this cause. Thank you and enjoy.
Given the situation the world is going through, populations in the world, in different parts of the world, there is a global phenomenon of hatred that is being encouraged. And one has to be in denial not to acknowledge this, not to pause and say, what is going on? Peace, as people talk about, is now being truly seen for what it is. When people talk about peace, that is, it's just skin deep. People are pretending to be kind in many, many cases, especially from the sources that one expect to hear talk about peace. Usually, leaders and in different fields, not just the rulers of a state, a country, a community, but also leaders in the capacity of having a voice, a recognition, as being speakers on that arena, let's say religious leaders. Since childhood, I've been hearing about it. We must have peace, we must have a ceasefire, we must have this, we must, and that's it. The person has pretty much done their job. Well, I'm against war. I'm against anyone who stands against any ceasefire to stop the bloodshed. Even though it is, of course, a wholesome thing to stand against the bloodshed of beings. But is it enough to say, well, I like to have, people have to have a ceasefire? And the person, after having said that, they can go on with their business of living their day. There's a certain level of, a deep level of detached concern. There's an indifference, lack in care for those people that are being killed, for those beings who are being slaughtered. Now, that is, of course, an extreme case through which we are living today as a world population. But what has been going on and is going on and will continue to go on, perhaps even increase exponentially from the way the trends are unfolding. One can just look and see in digital media, in online, in different sorts of publications, because every person has a say. Every person has something to share about their opinions, worldviews. Usually it comes in the package of judgment. In the past, people would read journals, or people would read newspapers specifically, or listen to the radio news broadcast, and it was a one-way street. They didn't submit, they didn't call, they didn't necessarily send their, in droves like the way they do now. Everybody has a platform. So instead of different platforms such as, I don't know what's, some of them like Twitter, or even some things like Facebook, or I don't know what, I think Reddit, I think there's that as well. These are different platforms that people have been using. I'm sure there's more that I'm unaware of. People have become their own broadcasters. When I say their own, it doesn't necessarily mean that they have a unique perspective. This is dangerous. If it were, that would be actually a good thing, because new ideas could come forward. What you do have is groupings of individuals that are highly influenced by whoever is the loudest, whoever has the biggest exposure. When I became aware of politics and how much money is being spent, especially in a place like the United States, millions and millions and millions of dollars a candidate has to spend. Well, there's money involved then. Because a human being is highly influenced, highly impressionable by what they see, what they observe, what they sense. And that is exactly what they have been manipulating. This is something that they've discovered decades ago, almost a century ago. Research this, look at this video, which I think it's still online. Man of the Century, I think that was 1970s, some BBC documentary that I have seen on this man. I mentioned him before, the father of propaganda, Edward Bernays, who was also the nephew of Sigmund Freud. He was the master manipulator of not just one group of people, but essentially you could say the whole planet. Most of the things that we today have come to accept as the norm, they were unthinkable decades ago, until people approached him and they gave him the mission of selling their product, whether it was cigarettes to women, certain types of outfits for women, pushing people to go and buy things that they don't need in these huge, newly constructed shopping centers they called malls, to make the rich richer. A product that wasn't selling, he was the guy to do the job. And how was he doing that? Psychological manipulation. Exactly what is happening today in the world on such a massive, massive scale. So when people say people have to, the world, the populations have to become nicer to each other, like these, I remember the Pope in the 80s and 90s and today as well, the Dalai Lama or somebody like that gets up and on a mic and says, oh, there should be peace and we should be compassionate, we should be compassionate. Talk is cheap. When these things were going on, I remember when I was a teenager, bombs were falling all around us. We were huddled together. We didn't even have bunkers. We would rush down several stories. We used to live at the top floor, and we had to rush down. There were no elevators, and there were no power, no electricity. sometimes way early in the morning, in the middle of our sleep. My dad would spend countless sleepless nights. Talk about PTSD, not falling asleep, because you don't know what it means to have safety. Because any moment, the mortar attacks that were happening, they would be carpeting the whole city. And if you didn't run fast enough down to the bottom of the building, where there was one lady, she used to live alone, and we had thought, not just us, our family, but other neighbors from sometimes from other buildings would come huddling there. So you would have more than 10 families living in that staying in that tiny little apartment, huddled together. No lights, no power. One tiny bathroom. We had to ask her if it's okay for us to use her bathroom. And the bombs would be falling. And then, as my dad, he had this big radio, wooden thing, and then over the years, it became, like Sony plastic, black. I remember those. And he would have it really close to his ears because the bombs, sometimes they would be dropping, they would be exploding all around you. So you would have a hard time, and women would be screaming, the children would be screaming. So my dad had to really put his ear next to the speaker of the radio. And sometimes we would hear, oh, so and so religious leader is urging people to stop. It's laughable. I mean, these rich religious leaders run empires. Okay? They have their own armies in many cases. They get a cut. They have their own investments. They have their own money making mechanisms, banks underneath all of this. But that realization came later on when I was doing my research, when I was in my late teens. I saw how much money is being laundered, how much money is being made from the killing, from the bloodshed of people, how many weapons or arms are being sold by these rich people, these heads of state, these royals, these, the king of, or, Queen of England, or the US, the Canada, the Geneva Convention. Yeah, but look how many Swiss people actually make money from selling bombs. Russians the same, Chinese the same, Arabs the same. Everybody's making money, but I would be stunned and at the same time feel a sense of hopelessness at the state of the populations around the world. People, regular people. Now, I have been fortunate enough to travel, to see, to have friends from different diverse backgrounds, religions. And there's so much love. When you're just talking about individuals connecting, the population connecting with each other, the crowds connecting to one another. When there is that connection, there's no politics. No human being will want to do that unless there are forces at be in the background who are profiting from the bloodshed. So what can you do? What can we do? What can I do? I'm simply a Buddhist monk. And I'm just like everyone else, being confronted with all these atrocities. And I hear statements like racism, 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 something ism, which simply engenders, brings about more hatred. And the media is doing, well, it's continuing the legacy of that evil entity called Edward Bernays, and that clan, that group of people that are very much now have reached the pinnacle of how they can manipulate. Because you have an entire industry, limitless resources behind them. That includes research, that includes personnel, that includes tools and technology to manipulate more and more people. That's why I always urge people to go beyond what they're hearing, what they're seeing. Most of it is just a show. The news, most of it, the events, most of it are just setups. They're not actually what they say they are. But one thing is for certain. When they're pulling that little infant from a building that used to be a hospital out of the rubble, they're pulling this child who is half dead or sometimes completely dead. That's real. The people crying, thousands and thousands of people crying, and more hatred is being generated. How is that going to get rid of hatred? You will never be able to crush energy. And hatred is energy. Energy that did not exist, but it has been existing, because if you do not have hatred, people will not be able to sell bombs. People will not be able to sell a single bullet to kill another, to invade another country, to take advantage of other things. Because you have entire groups of elite organizations that have been geared towards steering humanity. When I say humanity, I mean everyone else, us, any way, any direction they choose to. Because one thing I realized, racism has nothing to do with race. Has nothing to do with race. Some people might be shocked to hear that or disagree blatantly. But that's my observation from looking at people, speaking, communicating, blending and going and conversing, communing with people. I've seen that really the person doesn't see the color or the shape of the nose or the shape of the eyes or the height of the person or what their ethnic background is or their accent. It really doesn't matter. Ultimately, racism has everything to do, however, with laziness. Laziness to push yourself to consider another viewpoint, to another possibility. There are so many towns I've been to, so many places I've been to where, especially now as a Buddhist monk, 6'5", tall, bald man, in some places they will look at you, why is he wearing that? Automatically I stand out. Automatically I don't belong, quote unquote. Why is such a person here? Is he a cult member? Is he a cult leader? I once actually was accused of that. A person has seen a picture of me, and they sent to one of my students this thing, and we didn't know whether to laugh or the shock was like, Buddhist monk, and there's plenty of information there. But the person stopped at what the image conveyed to them. Conveyed to them, not in a vacuum. Conveyed to them, given the few nuggets, the few tiny little pebbles of past experiences they might have had in that arena. So what many, like when I was in Europe once, so many people that I was encountering on the street, they were saying anything from Hare Krishna or are you, one time a person said, Tibetano, I said, no, no Tibetano. So I would tell them, I'm a Theravadan Buddhist monk. And what is that? They would say, I would tell them, it's a bhikkhu is a Buddhist monk, and we go back 2,600 years. One time, I think it was in Napoli, I got off the train, and suddenly I get this man, and who was all tatted up, and he came by, and he's looking really come close, and that person didn't have like a sense of boundary, but he wasn't threatening at all. He was looking up. I mean, and he's like, Shaolin, Shaolin, Shaolin. So the person simply has that reference point. When you do not want to go beyond your reference point, that means you're lazy. That's when the characteristics that later on can be identified as quote unquote racism come into view. But racism as such doesn't exist. Now the media will really take that and run with it, as they say, which they will do irresponsibly, because the human brain is geared towards negative bias. Any psychologist knows this. Any researcher in neuropsychology, neurobiology, neurology, sociology, they know this. And guess who else knows this? All groups, all businesses that function on manipulating human psychology to direct people's choices any way they want, manipulate people, know about this. The head of BlackRock, someone had sent me a video from World Economic Forum, and he's sitting there with that character, the self-proclaimed, leader of the New World, Klaus Schwab or whatever his name is. All these are unelected individuals. It's surprised that nobody's actually standing up. Nobody's saying, like, who are you? Pull the plug on these things. These characters who are running the show. And BlackRock happens to be apparently the main resource where all the owners, basically. And this man, I think it was him, who was saying, well, we can't just let human beings be the way, think the way they do. It needs to be done in a way where we continue to manipulate. We have to direct them any way we want. And that is how, so basically there is no choice. He is saying on camera how we must control people. We must, and we do, influence the direction of the world, where it's headed. So when we have atrocities, when we have tragedies in people's lives, there are authors behind it. And what is saddening is when these religious leaders, like I mentioned in the beginning, they make it sound like it's the people's fault. And this is where the problem is. And this is a very postmodernist, neo-capitalist way of running things. Where, let's say, a company is not doing so well, what do? They punish the workers by firing them. And then you have the whole entire PR group that I was mentioning, comes in and says, downsizing. Downsizing. What does that mean? The person is now fired. They don't use that word now. But that's what it is. The person is no longer there. They are not able to make a living and pay for rent. And guess what happens? If they can't pay for rent, they will go and live on the street. And guess what they do afterwards? They come and blame you, and they will ostracize you. They will label you. They will call you a homeless, a bum, a hobo. By the way, most people don't know what hobo means. It's an acronym. I found this out some time ago. I was mentioning this to some students in Australia when I was there, and they were like blown away. Hobo means, in the earlier days, when people would come, let's say, to California or somewhere from the other parts of the country, and they would not have enough money to go back, train ticket or bus ticket, Greyhound or whatever, they would hitchhike. So, and they would say, I'm homeward bound. Homeward bound. So it's a mouthful, right? Several syllables. Homeward bound became hobo. Hobo, hobo. So the person now is a transient. Now, of course, they also are dumping so much drugs, and for that, they started this about, I think, about 10 years ago, maybe more, to legalize marijuana. Everybody was like, yeah, the majority of the public was, yeah, finally, finally, we have, legalized marijuana. But I was sitting in the sidelines just observing this as to what this debacle is going to lead to. What tragedies is it going to bring to humanity, to society? But all of these things are so well calculated. And we have to stop being sheep. We have to stop being the herd, because if you're a herd, you're going to be herded. You're going to have somebody to tell you where to go, dictate where your next direction is going to be. And they're doing that. Your phone, there's cameras looking back at you while you're looking at your phone screen. Your smartphone is smart for a reason. It's smart enough, it's smarter than you because it's following your pupils. And the algorithms are so well done that the supercomputer that's running this, that's collecting the data, it knows which ads, which images your pupils are guided towards. According to that, the next list of items that you will be seeing will be geared towards that, which you just looked at millisecond ago. That's how fast. This is AI. Why AI? AI is not there to be our servant, our slave, our helper. Like most things in a world that has gone non-virtuous, not virtual, by the way, hugely different, immoral, unethical. If you are a non-virtuous person living a non-virtuous life, that means you only care about yourself. You are self-serving, which all these people are, these big shots. And of course, they can't say I am selfish. They have to have something there that camouflages that greed of theirs. Like Bill Gates goes out and says, oh, I'm donating a few $1 billion. Well, let's go find out which company is funding so that they could approve a new vaccine or something that people don't need so that they end up killing more people, mutilating people and embryos and things. People have to speak about these things, and we should not be silent about these things. They don't realize that, as a Buddhist monk, I have been criticized, and I still do get criticized, of course, because I have not come out of luxury. I have not come out of, a world that was peaceful. I came into the scene in a world that was on fire. I am a survivor of war. I know how it feels when a bomb blasts and it destroys your home and the shrapnel come and destroy your body and your family. Your body carries the examples or the marks of that. I have scars, actual scars. I have body parts missing. I have seen what evil does. So I'm not going to stick my head into the sand and say kumbaya, or, Buddha only talked about peace and tranquility. He just avoided getting involved with things that are happening. Then the Mahayanists have a point. Then, if that were to be true, it is not true. Often Theravadan monks, the original path of Lord Buddha, the monks, have been accused of being self-centered, self-serving, and that is not true, if you look at Lord Buddha's example. Now, of course, rarely do you find monks who do follow Lord Buddha's example. You have so many thousands of monks who go through the routine, and that's it. And they will cherry pick what they feel like keeps them benefiting from the status quo. As long as they keep quiet, they will get their donations, they will get their support. Some king is going to come and give them more, cookies and lollipop-like banners that look like a Bodhi leaf, and nice little things, and recognition, and big monasteries given to them, a big title. And Lord Buddha never cared about those. Those are things to be shunned. Those have nothing to do with the Sangha. That has to be really criticized and found blameworthy, because it is. Because when a ruler of a country comes, and basically it's a silencing device. Okay? So when a Theravada in Mahathera or somebody gets this award, and it's like, yeah, the king comes, bows down, and gives you this and that, and what it is they're buying your silence. And you are in cahoots with what these people are doing, because the countries are going down the tubes. You go to Southeast Asia country, Thailand included, Sri Lanka included, Burma, everywhere. These are traditionally Buddhist countries, and you go and you're shocked. You're shocked. Buddhist monks are not being respected. Now, sometimes they have a point, the public, because, you have to earn respect, right? The behavior of the monks. But other times, where is that culture? So, and that comes from the silence of the monastics, the Buddhist monks, because Lord Buddha himself was very vocal about unfair treatment of women. That's just one example. About ecology, about the way to have a wholesome, morally sound, ethical, virtuous ways of earning a living and be very wealthy. I was just translating a sutta yesterday from the Book of the Tens, where Lord Buddha is talking to Anathapindika, who was in modern terms, probably would be almost like a trillionaire. He was so rich. And he would go, he built a huge monastery for Lord Buddha in Savatthi. And he's there, and he goes to listen to Lord Buddha. And Lord Buddha is listing 10 different types of individuals who seek to pursue enjoyment of life's pleasures. So there's a spectrum. So he starts by listing the 10. The first one is the person who goes about earning a living immorally, unethically, without caring, without taking into consideration other people's needs. So any of the billionaires that you find in the world today, most of them, they live like that. And Lord Buddha lists another qualification for that and says, such a person does not know the true meaning of happiness. They don't know how to find happiness within themselves. And on top of that, they don't share the money that they've earned. So these are individuals that are to be blamed for all these different reasons. And then you go slowly down the gradient, and you go to a person, for example, who earns his living through morally sound, ethically based, virtuous lifestyle while earning a lot of money. Such a person also knows how to find happiness within themselves because they also share in the wealth that they've amassed. So you see the huge range. What we have today is a culture where greed is being promoted. Greed. Any way you can get your hands on money and power and prestige, it's okay, basically, so long as you don't get caught. Look at any politician around the world. They promise the heavens to the public, and the public goes and votes and things like that, and then they get into office. All of a sudden, it's like a Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde, except that this person is not going to change tomorrow back to being a good, virtuous person, or what they promised to be when they get elected, because it's night and day, completely shifted. So this also causes people to want to not try so hard. So we want to get quick results. Remember what I said about racism doesn't have anything to do with race? It has to do with laziness. Here you see the connection. I hope you're able to see it. Because when you are driven by greed and you want to get to your goal, greed infested, want to be like other rich people, and really make it, as they say, big, you really don't want to care about how many people's heads you step on, how many people's rights you step on, how many people's homes you demolish, you ruin. You'll do it. Today's governors, like, whether it's California, New York, other places, it's shocking. How could you go to sleep at night knowing that millions of people now who are under your care, basically, that's what it means. If you're the governor, what are you governing? Really, what are you governing? Your own assets? Your assets are your people. But this is not about California. This is about the whole world. I've seen this all around. You go to Australia, you see this. People are pretty much becoming more and more imprisoned. Cameras everywhere. Everywhere. Every move you make, you're under radar. You're actually, you better watch out. You don't go crossing the line. You don't color outside the line. Our humanity is being suffocated. It's being dragged out of us. We are being drained of our even common sense. Even our common sense is being stolen. I mean, look what happened there, or what has been happening in the world. People who said, well, wait a minute, we don't want to, what is this experimental drug you're enforcing on me? Like, you're forcing me to take something that I am not comfortable because I need to see more data. No, you have to take it. And then what do? Labels. Labels. So sometimes people are doing this thing. I mentioned laziness, but what also it comes with is to fit in. Because it takes a little bit of adventurous spirit from you to want to go ahead and speak to that person whose skin color is different. I was mentioning race doesn't have much to do with race, but it has to do with laziness. But also, the laziness also for me means being unwilling to be curious, adventurous in that sense of finding out about this person. And not saying, no, I'm stuck with only talking with, spending time with this type of a person. I'm not curious about that. I've seen this everywhere. I've seen this in the Middle East. I've seen this in UK. I've seen this in Europe. I've seen this in Asia. No place actually is immune to this. because it doesn't have anything to do with a specific culture or country, which is another thing. They've been putting people, in a contentious fighting mode, head-to-head combat type of a situation, and the media is doing this. It's fueling this. Leave people alone. But they want to create wars. They want to. That's why they opened up a few, 6 years ago, 7 years ago. They opened up the. All of a sudden, you have millions of migrants going into Europe. I was like shaking my head. I said, "What are you doing? Don't you know anything about biology?" These people are coming in from a culture that doesn't know anything about these people's culture. Western culture is highly different than the Middle Eastern culture, North African culture. Religiously, sociologically, culturally, they have different value systems. So you can't be like those woke idiots who just go ahead and not think about, okay, what is my next move going to be resultant? They have no idea of what Lord Buddha talks about in dependent origination. Paticca samuppada, causal relations. So it doesn't have anything to do with your own ideology or how you like to have the world be. It has nothing to do with that. You're not grounded. You're not on the ground. You don't know what people do, apparently. You have to take off your rose-colored glasses. It's very similar to having a wolf enter your chicken coop. Because if the person has been walking around women who only wear burqas, and now you place them in the middle of Hyde Park or New York City or Milano, good luck having things be normal or under control. No, 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 no. You're going to create chaos. And that's exactly what they want, because they want to further separate us from each other. And the way they do that is it's very well studied. So they start the spark. They start fire. So they create a world that's highly inflammable. And then they create these problems in the Middle East, this and that, and all of a sudden, of course, you're going to have chain reactions. So they want to create fear and panic further and further. Because how many news articles have you seen come out that talk about joy, that talk about promoting of happiness? That's why you need to really tone it down with all these discourses, or people, religious leaders who go up and say, they kind of bless you and they say, oh, and let's be compassionate, let's be this and let's be that. Meanwhile, when they go to visit a place, they live in a mansion. They take entire penthouses for themselves. These are personal experiences. I've seen people do this. I know people who have been, involved with that. And so they're completely, it's like a Marie Antoinette syndrome that these world, or especially religious leaders in this case, have. They're living in a cocoon, in a bubble. And their buddies are what? Who? The same people that are responsible, who have their own cuts. They go to Davos, they go to, they hobnob, they rub elbows with these individuals who are responsible for the killings of millions of people. So we have to say it like it is. Otherwise, we are really lying to ourselves. Some people have heard, in hearing me speak about these things, they said, "Oh, you're an anti-vaxxer, or you're an anti this or anti that." No, I'm anti-ignorance. I am anti-stupidity. I am anti-manipulation of people. I am anti-lies. I am anti-hatred. I am anti-contention. I am anti the promotion of aggression towards other people, because that's what they want. You know, that the old adage, in social studies we learn this, and also in books, thousands of references made to this: divide and conquer. Okay, then you can rule them. You look at the Middle East, it's a perfect example. All of the big colonial powers in the world, imperial powers in Europe, what did they do when they pulled away from their so-called colonies? Do you know that the US also is still a colony of the UK, of the British? The British Empire doesn't exist as such in name, but so most of the history that we've learned is only a tip of the iceberg. But you don't have to go and, uh, be lost in different things. You just look at the very, very basic things. The hatred that is being promoted in the world has nothing to do with what you hear people talking about. There is a movement in manipulating the public's mind, causing one group of people to hate another. Even these boycotts that are happening. I recall a few years ago the MLB, right? BLM, MLB, BLM, right? And then there was something else. There was like the gender thing. There's every few months or few years there's something, and all of a sudden you see these forces. I mean, I look at patterns, and you cannot be a Buddhist practitioner without seeing and identifying patterns, because patterns means that you are able to observe with wisdom. You have common sense to stop and pull back, as they say. You pull back the camera and you observe the bigger picture. This is not what they want. The propagandists don't make money like that. Because if you catch them at their game, they lose. And the only way that you can disclose what they really have been up to, what they're doing, is if you're able to identify the patterns. And that's another reason why they're eliminating history classes from universities and even high school. Proper history, American history, world history, etc. But if you lose your history, you lost it. Because now our new generation of human beings in the world is deprived of details, even from the generation preceding them. This is not just tragic, but this is extremely dangerous for the public. Because that means you will not see those hands that are using you as a puppet. You're not going to see patterns because there's a repetition. I'm old enough to see, I'm not that old, but I'm over a century old, right? Half a century old. I can look back and I remember this, and this happened. And I look back and I see, oh, this happened and then this happened. And now they give you some, they used to give you a gap. Their greed in wanting to control the number of human beings on this planet, to reduce them drastically, to control the public, the masses, and to squeeze us all into cities away from, urban area, into like the wild or nature areas, into the cities, so that you can become more controllable. Well, who does that? Exterminators do that, don't they? If you have some type of a pest issue, you call the pest control, right? People call if there's, I don't know, snakes or mice or some type of bugs and infestation. I remember one time I was watching a documentary, a reporter talking to the late husband of the Queen of England. I think his name was Prince Philip or something. He was in his like 60s or 70s, so he's not a young man. A highly, highly, highly influential person, though. And I think the journalist asked him, "What would you like if there were in their language reincarnation? What would you like to come?" He says, "I want to come back as a virus." He actually says that on camera. You can check it because I want to reduce the number of the public. Basically, that's what he's saying. Like the audacity of the person to be able to see this haughtiness, this "I am better than thou." I am better than you. You guys are the infestation. This is the mindset of today's elite, who have everything to do with the world state. The situation in the world is primarily being dictated not by the people on the ground level, the regular folk, who are being blamed for the hatred. Of course, everyone has the responsibility to bear. Lord Buddha says we are the inheritors of our own karma. Yes, but that's not the whole picture only as to what's happening in the world today and for the last several decades. We are being manipulated. So each of us has to really take ownership of our own happiness, starting with what it is that you're putting into your ears, what you're putting in front of your eyes. Please don't believe everything you hear. In fact, please don't go ahead and believe everything you think, because most of what you have been thinking up to this point has been highly manipulated, orchestrated, planned, scripted. Scripted. That is an actual 100% accurate term as to what's going on. So, knowing this, go ahead and do your work on yourself. Because I was mentioning this yesterday to students. Please don't live your life 100% dedicated to healing the world while you neglect yourself. Because you're going to burn yourself out and you're not even going to put a dent on that healing process. That's what the whole point of me spending the time talking to you about this issue, because I see so many people still struggling to bring peace into the world as if, I call that Mother Teresa syndrome. To want to help and to, you cannot forget yourself because it's so seductive, it pulls you out from the tranquility of your mind, which you need to make it a priority for you. And I keep telling people, please don't listen to the news, and they keep doing that. Please don't watch the news, but they keep doing that. And they come back, and do you think, oh, Bante, this person is going to do this, and this kind of, there's an agreement being reached, and this and that, and I shake my head. They're not going to come and tell you what they're planning. One incident that comes to mind from my time as a teenager, I remember watching this on the news as my dad was watching the news. And my dad would say, politics, it's so unreliable. It changes overnight. But as I was watching that segment, and it was one of the worst times, it was, I think, 88 or earlier than that. I don't remember. But basically, I was still a teenager. And it was heavy bombardment, heavy shelling. And that day we had, I think my dad had brought his car battery because we didn't have power most of the time. So he would go downstairs and get the car battery out of the car. He would carry it up the fourth-story building, and he would just put it there. And we had a small black and white TV. So he would hook it up, and then we would have power, right? So I remember watching this news piece that they were showing that all the heads of the militia, this is in Lebanon, that had been fighting for, with each other for over 20 some years. And they came to have this emergency meeting to kind of create a ceasefire. That's why I have zero faith in these things called ceasefire, because I've been hearing it since I was born. And then the news person, the reporters, were told that okay, this is now the politicians are now gone behind closed doors. They're going to discuss how to reach a ceasefire, etc., etc. So all these cameras were turned off, except for one camera was still running. And something happened. And the camera was still pointed at the direction of this conference hall or room. So they had these two giant doors, wooden. I still remember. And the doors opened by some accident. And as the door opened, not fully, but you could see what was happening behind it. I saw distinctly two of the worst of enemies to each other, heads of militia, hugging each other, laughing, holding each other as you would hold a very loving friend that whom you haven't seen for I don't know how many years, and you just saw them. They were the best of friends, and I felt like my jaw dropped. I was like, what? But so many people have died yesterday because you guys were bombing each other. When I say each other, that means the territories, the areas, the cities that each person, owns in a sense, governs. They have control over. Their militias are there located. So I said, wait a minute. So meanwhile, the people were like up in arms against each other, the people, against other people. The politicians are completely, in a sense, wearing white gloves. And the same thing with all these religious leaders, all these leaders, any leader who has some vested interest as in power, prestige, money, some type of a clout, some authority. Watch out. Don't believe everything. And journalists are also part of it because they are the ones who are the hands, the fingers of the propagandists. Edward Bernays I mentioned? These things are important issues that we cannot, because the world is not headed to the right, well, it's going towards the abyss. Everything wonderful we have is slipping through our fingers. If we don't catch it, if we're being set up against each other, divide and conquer, and we're the ones who are being divided, and we're the ones who are being conquered daily. Conquered by losing our common sense, our integrity, our kindness to each other, and as demonstrated by what has been happening during these last 3-4 years. People have become very greedy. People have become very self-serving. And that has nothing to do with kindness. And that has nothing to do with race, with the skin color or the religious belief of someone. None. What would a tennis ball do when the two tennis rackets, that kept banging away at it from one side of the court to the other, boom, 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 back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, with all those flamingo-like heads and necks who pay a lot of money to go and watch those games, overpriced. They keep turning their heads left and right, left and right, left and right. The main attraction is the tennis ball. What would the tennis ball do when there is no more rackets hitting at it? The rackets are on the ground, on the court, and now the ball, the tennis ball, comes to a full stop. What do you think the ball is going to experience? What do you think the ball will like? To be like that? Idle? Nothing? No excitement? Nothing happening? No one's going to look at the ball when there are no rackets hitting at the ball. No one will pay attention to the ball. Right? So the ball suddenly loses its purpose for being. And that's what you have. People today, they want to be that tennis ball, being shot from one side of the court to the other, from one extreme to the next, attaching themselves to one ideology, then another, holding a position, a reference point, holding to it for dear life, not letting go, identifying themselves with this position. Suddenly they have a purpose for being, just like that tennis ball had a purpose for being, so long as it was going back and forth from one side of the court to the other. Not many people will you find who in fact are intent on stopping that madness. It's exhausting to live your life like that, constantly jumping from one extreme to the next. But that is exactly what this world wants, especially now in this decrepit time period that where there is incredible amounts of greed, incredible levels of ignorance, lack of humanity, immorality, lack of common sense. Lack of common sense. I never thought that would be something I would witness to this extent in my own lifetime. But that's what we have. So people are now completely enmeshed, completely in love with that. And that is their purpose. So you need to entertain them. So it became an entertainment. So civilization, one of the things that is an indication that the civilization is at its lowest point, it's going down the tubes, as they say, is nearing the end of its life, is when the masses, the people, are constantly being entertained. Now, whether it's they're watching NFL, whether they're watching soccer, whether they're watching something other than looking at their lives with critical understanding, with clarity, responsibly looking and saying, okay, what is happening? So there's honesty and truthfulness that is lacking. That means they are far more concerned and evaluating and really holding in such high esteem their entertainment. That's why you see people going to Las Vegas, you see people going to places that don't exist in the real world. It's just entertainment. They go to shows, concerts, lights, things, as if the big casket-like thing that they have in their house called a TV is not enough. That brainwashes them constantly, and it's been doing, that's what it was designed for since the 40s and 50s, to manipulate and destroy the family structure. And they've done it with such strategy and such success, unfortunately, that we see that a human being is not satisfied with just having that in the house. They also want to go out and look for it in a concert hall, in entertainment venues, in games, sports. That is one of the, as they say, the four horsemen that are the clear indications that a civilization is nearing its end. And that's where we're at. But unlike how it was in the Roman times or other times, it's no longer one particular culture, one particular country, one particular people. It's the whole planet. It's the whole planet. So no culture, no country, no population is immune to this insanity, because we have become a global culture, a global community of stupidity, of irresponsibility, of completely subscribing to non-existent things, such as, oh, I want peace in the world. Oh, I want to be compassionate. How come people are not compassionate to the world? That's one of those idiotic statements that some religious leaders keep on talking about, blaming essentially the individual while they sit up there in their high pedestals. Meanwhile, they hobnob, as I was saying, with the rich and famous and powerful. The actual people who are in charge of these debacles, they are sitting and having food with them, toasting with them, laughing with them, taking selfies with each other. Go talk to those people. Why are you telling people, oh, you need to become more compassionate? Wearing your baseball hat as a, what? Stop your run with this celebrity desire, this quest, and really say what needs to be done. But these are just actors. They're just fulfilling a role. They've never been religious. They've never been. They're just actors. Mask-wearing actors. And the common person on the road, on the street, who is wondering how is he going to feed his family of 3, living in a tent on some concrete, trash-covered street in Los Angeles or in New York or in Rome. Those have more integrity in my book than those so-called Buddhist monks, Catholic priests, Christian priests, and others who keep talking big words while they go back and live in their penthouses and their mansions, surrounded by opulence and luxury and fame, which they never want to lose, by the way. What a terrible state of affairs. So one has to stop being that tennis ball, stop being a member of the, card-carrying member of the herd,